Now we go live to the scene of an officer-involved shooting where Brian Willis is standing by. I'm here at the scene of an officer-involved shooting from earlier today that left one man dead. Details at this point are sketchy. In fact, we just came from a press conference with the chief where he said he had no comment, refused to provide details on what led up to the shooting or what occurred during the shooting. What we have been able to piece together is that earlier today a member of the police department was involved in a traffic stop. During that traffic stop, he was engaged in a struggle or an altercation with a 30-year-old white male, and that male was subsequently shot and killed by the officer. How many shots were fired are unknown. Reason for the traffic stop is unknown. Everyone's not sure whether this gentleman was the driver or passenger in the vehicle. I'll continue to work on this story and bring you live updates as they become available. Brian Willis is reporting live from the scene of a candlelight vigil being held outside of police headquarters, where citizens have gathered tonight demanding answers, information, and justice in regards to the officer-involved shooting 2 days ago that left one man dead. That man has subsequently been identified as John Doe. Now, earlier today I spoke to the chief of police, and he's still refusing to provide details about the events leading up to the shooting or what happened during the shooting itself. I've had the opportunity to speak to members of the crowd tonight that have identified themselves as family and friends of the deceased John Doe. One of them said that he believes that the police used a taser on John before they shot and killed him. And other family members have told us that John was a troubled man, and although he was going through a difficult time in his life, there was no reason for the police to shoot him. Brian Willis reporting on the continually evolving situation where last night's peaceful protest has turned into a large-scale disturbance that's resulted in major clashes between large groups of protesters and the police, resulting in rocks and bottles being thrown at the police using tear gas and pepper spray to disperse the crowd. There have been a number of businesses in the downtown area that have been damaged. We're getting reports a number of people have been injured. Although the exact numbers are unclear, we've had information at least 2 officers are injured, and a number of arrests have been made overnight. The police are continuing to work to establish order in the downtown area, and while things now are relatively calm, tensions remain high. Now, in the story that I just relayed to you, what was the most dangerous weapon used by the police? Was it the gun that killed John Doe? Was it the taser that was allegedly used against John? Was it the pepper spray? Was it the tear gas? Was it the shields and the batons and the crowd control unit that responded to disperse the crowds? Or was it words? And not just any words, 2 words, perhaps the 2 most dangerous words in a law enforcement executive's vocabulary. These 2 words, no comment. Now, why would I suggest that these 2 words are the most dangerous words in a law enforcement executive's vocabulary? Because when there is a shooting in your community that involves the police and somebody is dead as a result of that shooting, and you hear the chief or the sheriff or the head of the state police stand up at the press conference and say no comment, what you think is cover-up. And you wonder what the police did wrong and why are they trying to cover up. Now, why would we think that? Because in every other major event in your community, at the press conference, the police give the facts as we know them, and we talk about the ongoing investigation. If there's a murder in your community, we talk about the facts as we know them, and we talk about the ongoing investigation. If there's a school shooting or shooting in a church or a mall, we give the facts as we know them, and we talk about the ongoing investigation. If there's a shooting where the police have shot someone to protect a citizen and save the life of a citizen, we generally talk about the facts as we know them. We praise the actions of the officer for saving the life of a member of our community, and then we talk about the ongoing investigation. But when there's an officer involved in a life or death struggle, and they shoot a subject and take a life to save their own life, then too often the chief or the sheriff stands up and says, no comment. And when members of the community hear no comment, very often they think cover-up. And when the officers from the involved agency hear no comment, they feel angry and they feel betrayed. Because one of their brother or sister officers was just involved in a violent struggle for their life, perhaps the most traumatic event in their lifetime. And they took the life of another human being to save their own life. And now their leader at that press conference, an opportunity to educate people about what happened and voice their support for the officer, stands up and says, no comment. And when the police are going to refuse to comment, then it opens the door for self-appointed and alleged experts, for politicians, for special interest groups to comment. The problem is their comments are often based on rumor and innuendo and speculation. They're always based on emotion, rarely based on the facts, because we don't release the facts as they're known at that moment in time. Now, we need to understand that police use of force is very rare. In fact, all of the research that's been done around North America that would suggest of the tens of millions of interactions that law enforcement professionals around North America have with members of the public, then less than 1% of them result in the use of force beyond the mere application of handcuffs and low-level control holds. Police-involved shootings are extremely rare, and yet you wouldn't get that from watching the news or television. How rare? Well, in 2011, according to the National Institute of Justice, of the in excess of 40 million contacts that took place between law enforcement professionals and citizens in this country, the number that resulted in shootings, not in the police killing somebody, but in a shooting by the police, would equate to 0.00002865%. Now, the statisticians would likely tell you that that's an insignificant number. But if you're that officer, if your family member is involved in that incident, if that's your community, if that's your neighborhood, if that's your village, your town, your city, then it's a significant incident. And at that press conference following the incident, the comment or the no comment by the chief or the sheriff is very often the tipping point that will determine how this event is going to play out in that community following the shooting. So what is the answer? The answer is to grow courage. The answer is to grow relationships. Grow the courage within the law enforcement community to give the facts as we know them and to comment. And if the facts as we know them support the fact that the officer acted reasonably, then say that. And if the investigation proves that the actions of the officers were inappropriate or unlawful or unreasonable, then we need to have the courage to stand up and say that as well. We need to grow relationships between the law enforcement agencies and the communities that we police and that we serve and protect. And we grow those relationships through a culture of integrity and courage and character, through discussion, through dialogue, through debate, through communication, and through education. Education about what? Well, we need to have the courage to educate everybody within the law enforcement profession and the law enforcement culture about the realities of the dynamics of these confrontations, and we need to educate the general public about this as well. So here are some things for us to consider. This term has been used an awful lot in the news lately, and for some reason this term has come to mean no threat and has certainly come to mean, in the eyes of many people, no deadly threat. In fact, there are alleged experts that have stood up and said that there is no way that a law enforcement professional could ever justify shooting an unarmed person. Well, I would ask you to consider some numbers. 1,406. That's the number of people murdered in this country in a 2-year period starting January 1, 2011 by unarmed people, where personal weapons were the weapon used in those murders. If you factor in asphyxiation, strangulation, and drowning, those numbers jump to 1,796. Now consider this number, 3. 3 would seem to be a reasonably insignificant number compared to 1,406 and 1,796. But 3 is the number of law enforcement officers murdered in that 2-year period by unarmed people, where the weapons used were personal weapons. And in fact, in this country in the last week, there was an officer who died in the line of duty where the weapon used against the officer in his death was personal weapons. Consider this number, 25. In the last decade, starting January 1, 2003, 25 law enforcement professionals in this country have been disarmed and murdered with their own weapons. Murdered by people who, prior to taking the officer's gun away and murdering the officer with their own gun, were unarmed people. Other things for us to consider. We need to consider the whole element of time. Action time, reaction time, time and distance, time to start, time to stop. And in fact, we're going to do some exercises here as a group to highlight this. Now, this is a training pistol. It's incapable of firing any type of a projectile. It's an inert pistol. Now, why would I have to explain that to you? Because if I just pulled this out and started pointing it at you, many of you would be very nervous and many of you would be very upset because you don't know if it's a real gun or not, and that's legitimate. Now, some of you would say, well, the slide of the pistol is red. It's obviously not a real gun. And yet there are criminal elements in this country that will take real guns and paint them fluorescent colors to cause law enforcement officers to hesitate. And there are toy guns and replica guns that are so realistic that the only way that you would know that it is not a real firearm is for you to have it this close and to hold it in your hand. But for the purposes of this exercise, I want you to imagine that this is a real gun, that this is a loaded gun, and I'm a subject and you're going to be the law enforcement officers. You're the law enforcement professionals. And when I do something with this gun that would cause you to believe that you need to shoot me to protect your life or the life of someone else, because as law enforcement professionals, you're sworn to protect everyone in here. So when I do something that would lead you to believe that you need to shoot me to protect yourself or someone else, I want you to yell bang in a loud voice. I want you to have the courage to yell bang in a loud voice when I do something with this pistol that would lead you to believe that you need to shoot me. All right, ready? Bang. You guys are kind of slow. Let's do this. Ready? Bang. Now, how many of you just shot me in the back? How many of you just shot me in the back while I was running away? Now, those of you who did that are going to say, well, I didn't shoot you in the back while you were running away. I shot you while you were pointing the gun at me. And you're right. But it takes time. It takes time for us to process that information. It takes time for you to process that information and to raise your gun and to fire that shot. And in the time you did that, I've already raised this gun, fired that shot, and turned and run. And it might have run 5 or 6 or more feet. And now your bullets are in my back. And the video shows that you shot me in the back while I was running away. Time is a critical factor in these events. Now let's do this. This is a training knife. Now when I do this with the knife, then I want you to start tapping. Those of you in the front row can tap on a leg or a pad if you have it. And all the rest of the rows and the chairs in front of you, there's 2 metal strips in the back of the chair. So I want everybody to start with their hands in their lap. And when I do this with the knife, you're going to start tapping as hard and as fast as you can in the front row on your lap and in the other rows on that metal bar in the back of the chair in front of you. And when I drop the knife, you're going to stop tapping. Ready? Now let me ask you 2 questions. Number 1, how many of you would be able with 100% certainty, under oath, to stand up in a court of law or a court of inquiry and testify with 100% certainty as to how many times you tapped? Now, some of you say, I would, and you'd be right. Some of you say, well, I would, but you'd be wrong. And some of you say, you know, I don't know. I don't know if it was this many times or that many times. And yet we have an expectation that law enforcement professionals engaged in a violent encounter or the threat to their life are going to have some kind of clear memory of everything that happened, including how many times they pulled the trigger. Now let me ask you this question. How many of you continued to tap after I dropped the knife? Because I heard tapping. And here's why. Because it takes time to start and it takes time to stop. It took time for you to process that information that I was a threat to you and to move your hand and start tapping, which would signify pulling the trigger. and it takes time for you to stop, and it's not instantaneous. And many of you continue to tap or continue to pull the trigger 2 or 3 additional times after I dropped the knife, and the video shows that you shot an unarmed man after I followed your commands and dropped the knife. Because all of these events are captured on video. They're captured on someone's camera or some other video, and there's a huge movement now to have all law enforcement officers wear some type of body-worn camera. And I think that body-worn cameras can be a great asset, but they're not a panacea. They're a piece of the totality of circumstances, a piece. But we need to understand this about cameras, that there are limitations to cameras. Video is only ever 2-dimensional. And yet we live in a 3-dimensional world, and the officer is processing information in 3 dimensions. The video that is recorded can be interpreted, but the camera does not interpret what it sees or records, yet we as human beings interpret. Videos never experience fear or emotion. Videos do not have any training or experience. Videos do not experience inattentional blindness. If I have a body-worn camera here and my hands are out in front of me while I'm shooting, what you're going to see is my hands. If I'm in a face-to-face struggle with somebody, you're going to see bodies and cloth and movement, and you're going to see little else. Videos will never record what the officer sees, feels, perceives. Videos are a piece of the puzzle, but they are not the answer. The answer is for us to grow courage and to grow relationships. Within the law enforcement community, no comment should no longer be acceptable. We need to have the courage to comment, to give the facts as we know them. And if the facts as we know them support that the officer acted reasonably and appropriately, then we need to have the courage to say that. And if the investigation shows otherwise, then we need to have the courage to say that. And we need to grow relationships between the law enforcement profession and the communities that we serve and protect. And those relationships need to be grown well before we have these events. Growing through integrity and courage and character. Growing through discussion and dialogue and debate and communication. Growing through communication. Growing through education. And my sincere hope is that all of you are part of that growth. Thank you very much.